revisiting Be Your Own Elite on today's Milenomics² podcast.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Simon.
And I'm Robert Dwyer.
And this is the Milenomics² podcast, no annual fee edition.
If you're not subscribed to the full Milenomics² podcast, you're missing out on a deeper dive into topics like the following. Where to begin here? I thought this would be great for a free show because I was getting on an airplane in Phoenix and I have a bunch of status and I realized it did me absolutely no good whatsoever. And then a few days later, an article came out, I think 1 mile at a time, and View from the Wing picked up on this, that Delta is now selling, for cash, 80% of their first class cabin. And that's
88%.
88, oh my goodness.
That's
up
better.
from like 10% a decade ago. So we wanted to revisit the whole topic of Be Your Own Elite. If you want to travel in the front of the plane, if you want to travel comfortably around the country, around the world, have things changed in the past 10, 20 years? And are we doing the right thing for us? Are people doing irrational things, putting 1% of the GDP on their Delta co-branded credit card? I mean, so many things have shifted underneath this, and we have to always revisit whether we're playing the game as well as we can. So let's start there. Did you have a chance to review these two articles to prepare for this important meeting?
I did my homework, Robert, and I did read the articles, and I think it's interesting to take like an inventory. You know, Milenomics, the blog, has been around for more than 10 years, and so we can look back at what was going on 10 years ago, either in the Be Your Own Elite space or in the actual elite space, and we could reflect on that. But I think we need to set the table. I think we need to speak about what's happening with Delta First Class right now and why they're selling so many of those seats. What do you think? Is that a good place to start?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I thought some of the things that they're doing there, Delta seems to be a leader, and when they do things, other airlines follow. And just the thoughtfulness that they put into fragmenting up their planes, premium cabins versus coach cabins, economy cabins, main cabin, and then even dividing those up, and just their revenue management and applying AI to doing things. It's like, wow, They are really thinking about how to run those metal tubes around the world.
All of those things you just said have ties to other things. For example, if you run a search on delta.com for a flight, you would think they are flying wide body, 4-cabin planes when you get your results, because there are basic economy plus, first class, or Delta One on every single flight, it seems. And so they've literally fractured up the plane into 4 different buckets or cabins. And the reason is not always for their benefit. The Delta Basic came around to compete with airlines like Spirit and Frontier, but they've really been able to fine tune that. And now they say, hey, if you book a Delta Basic fare, you can't even get into the Sky Club. Even if you have access, you're not going to get in. That's not a qualifying ticket. And so they really are working to push you up a level. Always, I feel like they need to create a level below Delta Basic to push you into Delta Basic now. But it's fascinating because they're not standing still, right? They're not. And it's great for a flyer like me or you who are kind of a free agent, a Be Your Own Elite. We don't really care who we fly. We just want to fly the way we want to fly, on the flight we want to fly, at the time we want to fly. And look, Delta does a decent job of putting those tubes in the air too. It's not that they're just like a credit card company that also runs an airline. They're both, and they do well on both.
Yeah, so many things to pick up on there. Let's talk about those credit card stats for a second. They up from $4 billion now to $7 billion people are spending on Delta co-branded credit cards. We've talked in the past about the co-branded paradox, where even if you would like to take the rewards for your credit card spend and apply them to Delta, you'd probably be better off doing something different. You'd be better off spending with an American Express card that you could convert into Delta miles. But people have this
That's a great point.
long-standing irrational kind of consideration of the situation, and travel seems to be a big motivator. If you had say you're a musician and there was a Guitar Center co-branded card out there, there's something about travel that I think uniquely has its hold on people, and they like to take their rewards in that way. So here we are, and I think historically Delta did things that made it worth you spending on those cards, and thinking about status, for example. But you have to put so much spend on those cards at this point to get any modicum of Delta status. And I think about, flying on a route that's heavily populated by Delta elites. Say I fly to Boston to Minneapolis. There are going to be so many people on that flight with all kinds of levels of status. If you step on the plane and you don't have any status, you're going to be lucky to get a seat at all. So you put all the spend on these co-branded cards, and then you're proud because you have silver or gold status, and that is nothing in the arms race as it relates to status. And the news about this, 80+% of the first cabin being sold out. You look and you just see it's a very modest additional premium they charge for first sometimes. It's like 25%, 30% more. It's hardly anything. They're giving it away. It doesn't pay to put all the spend on those co-branded cards, and just pay for it when you want it, if you want it, or not, right? But just there's something about the psychology of a, quote, free upgrade that has a hold on people that is irrational. I think it's one of the main things I think we want to get away from.
Robert, it's so irrational. There's a whole system in place to make it seem so easy, right? You get your status, and then you clear your upgrades, and look at these photos, and look at this meal I got, and look at this plane I took. And what's not told is one seat, maybe, right? How many seats do you need? I need 4. How about you? 3, maybe 4?
And that's a huge percentage of the cabin. So the chances of well, first of all, they're not going to bring more
than one companion. But you can't even pull 4 people in. Right, yeah, exactly. Right.
And then you even think about same day changes or some of the other perks that come with things. And if the airline has sold out the cabin beneath you before they even start processing upgrades, a lot of that flexibility that used to be the advantage of status and first class upgrades isn't going to be realizable. If you're going to want to do a same day change and that first cabin on the other flight that you want to change to is sold out, which I think almost every time I fly Delta, the front of the plane is filled up, you're going to be sitting back in main cabin. So it just a lot of the perks of status don't pay off in the current scheme, whereas I think they used to. The first cabin was reserved for that frequent business traveler that would get an upgrade. I have not seen it on the routes I fly.
I flew a Delta route, Robert. I think I sent you a photo of the upgrade list. The flight has, it's just a regular 737, so that's like what, 175 seats. There are 45 people on the upgrade list. That's more than a quarter of the plane are Delta elites. And I mean, if you do the math, 88% of a cabin, if it's a 16-seat first-class cabin, there's only 3 seats available that aren't sold out from under you. And so the first one person, maybe 2 people on that list are going to get an upgrade, and everyone else is going to just... But again, here's that fracturing up of the cabin. Everyone else on that list would be given the option of, let's say, an even more space seat or a Delta Plus seat. And that's something that we've seen. I think that's been a dramatic change. You'll hear people say that that's premium economy sometimes. You'll hear people say all these crazy things. And it's not premium economy, let's be honest, all right? It's a little bit more space and maybe something to drink. But it makes you feel a little bit special when your upgrade doesn't clear, and your upgrade probably almost never clears. But you're in that even more space seat, and you're just 6 rows back from the front of the plane. And I got to give it to them. I mean, I can see the allure, but it is absolutely, maybe more than ever, Robert, a trap to try to chase status.
Yeah, no, 100%, right? Like, there are opportunities where you can get status for hardly any effort. Maybe it's a status match.
I've got that. You've got that. Let's talk about that, Robert. What status do you have right now?
I've got Alaska 100K MVP somehow. I've got Delta Platinum. Nothing with United, nothing with AA. Well, I don't even have an AA account, but the Alaska 100K MVP is just one of the bizarre examples of it. And maybe is it because we've done very little to earn the status that we look at it in a different way than if we worked really hard, especially if we were flying for business and going through the grueling flight after flight after flight, and now we've got status. I really think about that type of traveler. I know it's not really the crowd that we speak to typically, the frequent business traveler. If we get back to traveling like we used to before the pandemic, business travelers overall, the semi-frequent one, maybe once every 2 months or something like that. Yeah. I'm just thinking like I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, am I going to self-fund an upgrade? Because even if you were had a pretty significant amount of Delta status, you're not getting upgraded, I don't think, on the flights that you're taking. So what do you do? Just like you say, hang out in Main Cabin Plus or Comfort Plus or whatever, and you're like, oh, okay, this is good. But you see that guy up there in front of you who used some other instrument to book that seat from out from underneath because Delta was giving it away for hardly any more, and your company wouldn't pay that small difference. So two questions there. What status do you have currently? What did you do to get it? And what do you think about that type of traveler? What would you do?
Oh, wow. I love those questions. I don't have any airline status, but my wife doesn't even know it, but she's AA Platinum. And she just earned it through some opportunities to earn AA miles on her cards that she has. And those, have come and gone. I mean, again, we've been in the space so long. We remember when all spend on cards was counting towards elite qualifying with AA, and then that disappeared. And then, a couple years back now, they've returned it with these loyalty points. And so everything old is new again. I think that for a while it looked like they wanted to limit the number of people that were elite, and now I think they've got a better handle on it. Maybe it is like big metal, like AI being able to really judge what's going on better than humans. But if I was in that situation, I think we're not even telling the whole story here, Robert. Like there's still this idea out there. I pulled an old blog post here from Milenomics, the blog, and it's showing a flight that's like 2-3 hours, and the difference in price from main cabin to first class was like $210. I think that's what people think, right? I think people think there's like a multiple hundreds of dollars difference or a large percentage of difference. But I really believe we have seen that you can get into that first class cabin with Delta for sometimes under $100 even. Difference between your fare and first class. And so I do think self-funding is valuable with the comfort level maybe, and it depends on the flight time. But what I don't want to start doing is chasing those upgrades and finding myself on flights that are less direct or flying at weird times. There probably are people on Flyer Talk or elsewhere who are sharing what routes have the shortest upgrade lists.
Yeah.
And crafting their entire, that's that whole like one seat, photos of everything mentality. Like all I do is fly at 5 a.m. with 2 stops and I get upgraded all the time. Like, no, I would rather sit in the regular seat and just be there.
Well, there's, I think, a lot of ways besides just chasing status that are not the best way to go about things. If you ever, one of my first forays into like travel hacking, if you want to call it that, was knowing people who were non-revs. They worked for the airline. And I remember a couple of times, we can go to Europe, but you can't go to Paris or London or any of the big cities you want to go to. You can go to Brussels
only in October
or something like that. Like, hey, we could just hop on a plane and go to Vegas this weekend. Let's go. And then you're sitting there on the standby list, and airplane after airplane after airplane keeps leaving, and you're sitting there at the airport all weekend, and you're not getting the flight. And the flights were $89 or something like that. Like, why didn't you just shell out the money for that? So there's a lot of things that you can do that. There's the psychology of the free upgrade. Even the word upgrade itself sounds good. Like, hey, Mr. Dwyer, we'd like to have you up to the desk here because we want to talk to you about a complimentary upgrade. I mean, it just sounds great. It feels great. And maybe like, you're saying like, you're not so impressed with what happens in the front of the plane. Like the ultimate luxury, like you say, is getting the flight that you want at the time you want it, and just a decent, respectable product. But let's pause on that concept for a second. There's all these things that you can do, and maybe even collecting airline miles with the hopes of some outsized redemption. Like, oh, you want to take a Emirates first class shower, this is going to be incredible. You collect these Alaska miles. This is this great thing. And there's all these gotchas when you come to redeem it. And if you think about the frequency of travel of even people in our community who travel a lot, it's not worth wrapping your lifestyle around. Like you shouldn't go get a job at the airlines because of free travel, I don't think, unless you really like the work, right? The day-to-day work of being a flight attendant working for an airline in some capacity. So what do you think about all that? Just the promise of, being at the craps table all night and losing $500 so that you can get a free breakfast voucher, for example. All these things, they seem like the same kind of trap to me.
Delta had created this Sky Peso, and that was like a derogatory term for their mile for a long time. But really, when there's low aspirational value to those points and miles, you're going to use them. You're just going to use them. Doesn't matter what flight you use them on. They're around 1 point something cents a piece. And I think that is why you're seeing such high spend on their cards. There is a co-branded paradox, and it doesn't make sense. But if you think about someone that says, look, it's never really good to try to find some crazy booking on a different airline and an alliance partner and all that stuff. I'm just going to take free flights, quote free, nothing's free, but quote free flights, and just refill and refill and refill. And my spending is going to just go all on the Delta card. I think the things that we pointed at Delta and said, they're doing everything wrong in the last 10 years. We do not know how to run an airline. We do not know how to run a loyalty program. We have the focus of how we can use those things to our advantage. But Delta has crafted a program. The numbers don't lie here, Robert, that people are spending on the credit card. People are spending on the cabin, the first class cabin, and they're doing it because people see value there. And I think that's the ultimate. There was not a comparison of the value of something and the price of it in the past. And I think those two things have finally met, and the value of what they're charging you, either for an upgrade or straight up for the ticket or book it with miles, and the value of those miles, all of those things have converged now into a point where it makes sense to do this. And that's what we're seeing with this increase.
No, you're right. People, it feels good, I bet, when people redeem their Delta miles and they fly back from their one family vacation that year and they get to fly in first class. It's pretty cool, right? Because it's not that many miles. They got a 50% rebate for having the Amex card, and people kind of, it just works for them. They don't have to be super crafty, and they don't feel like they're waiting on that Alaska mile to be redeemed for this massive outsized value for this bizarre international destination that they didn't even want to go to. It just kind of works.
And they may never go to, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think of, like you ever see like a restaurant chain, we're reconfiguring our loyalty program. It happens all the time, like, Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, Kava, Chipotle, whatever it is. It's like they're constantly rejiggering it. But people just they want to have some type of reasonable reward. They don't want to be an expert in Mediterranean fast food cuisines to have a good loyalty experience. Like, I bought some stuff, I got a free burrito. That's great. So you look at Delta, and they are like that, right? Every person who has a Sky Miles account can find it very easy to redeem and get value out of it. Now, I have to say, they've done it pretty well. You look at JetBlue, by contrast, they have not done it well. My goodness. I mean, how many times have they reconfigured their program? They've got tiles. They've got a inferior banking partner in Barclays versus Amex. And you look at this Amex Delta partnership, and I can't believe how effective it is. I mean, it comes together in a big way. Yeah, I fly here. I take a Uber that I get paid for by Amex with my business or with my personal platinum card. I stay at the Sky Club, which is pretty nice in a lot of cases. I fly on Delta and, in the front of the plane if I want to, if the price makes sense. That is a very Amex sponsored experience. And, you look at what the experience would be with some other airlines and banks. It's nothing near that level of tie-in. So it's a pretty impressive operation they've put together. But I do want to call out the things that are irrational about it. And I really think that we have to stop and make sure that everyone understands it's not good to put spend on a Delta card at this point. I don't know why so many people are doing that. It's crazy.
Rewind the show 1 minute to where you said JetBlue's doing things terribly, Delta's doing things great. That doesn't mean we're not going to fly JetBlue. It doesn't mean, Robert, that because you don't have an AA frequent flyer account, it doesn't mean you're not going to fly AA. I think that the rational traveler mentality, the be your own elite mentality is so much more important, because in a vacuum, you hear all these great things about Delta. Look, we just cut a 25-minute show about how great Delta is. But if they're not going to fly the flight direct at the time I want, I'm going to look at all these other airlines. And I think that we have we have put ourselves in a position where we have the miles in those other airlines, we have the knowledge of those other airlines, and we just know how things work well enough to be able to jump around. And I think that needs to be the next level. If you're a Delta flyer and you love Delta and you think they're the greatest thing in the world and you're putting all your spend on a Delta card, you need to start making some changes. You can stay with Delta, just put your spend on something else. Then as soon as you put your spend on like an Amex card, you start having the flexibility to look at other things. And you start having the flexibility to take care of yourself instead of like, well, there's a delay. I'm going to go call the Diamond line and they're going to take care of me. And they're going to reaccommodate me tomorrow and give me an overnight. Or you could be on a plane in an hour and 45 minutes and home today if you just jump on it yourself. So I think being rational is so much more important than being loyal. And I don't want this episode to confuse those two, or I don't want this episode to make loyalty seem like it's important over rationality.
Yes. I just flew to Phoenix. I flew JetBlue out, Mint. Fantastic they have that. I flew AA back.
That's a great example.
Delta's only flight was a red eye, and so it's a non-starter for me. And so even though I have a ton of Delta Sky Miles sitting there waiting to be deployed, it wasn't the time to use them. So let's talk a little bit about, if we say don't put spend on Delta Amex cards, Well, what do we recommend? What if we spent 200 plus episodes of an hour a piece talking to people about it in general terms, right? Like, does that mean spend on a cashback credit card? Does that mean earning flexible currencies? Does that mean churning things? Like, what does it mean? Because I think a lot of friends in real life will come to me and they say, "Hey, I know you're big in that credit card thing, and we want to fly the family to Paris. What should we do? What credit card should we get?" And then it's like, when did you want to go? In a couple months? Oh, geez, you want one credit card to sign up for to get your family to Paris in 2 months? That's kind of a hard ask of one credit card. So, just generally speaking, if we're not saying spend on Amex co-branded cards, what are we talking about in general for making people be able to take the flights that they want when they want?
As you're saying that, I'm thinking, as we talk, sometimes I think of certain posts from 10 years ago or more. And one of them is like, this is probably the worst blog in the world for you, for most people listening, right? Because I think the first question is, how much are you actually traveling?
Yeah.
Like if it's, I go on a trip a year, it's just put it all on a cashback card. And then you can do whatever you want with it. And then maybe there's some guilt. And maybe that's why miles are so nice, because they feel like they're free and they're not money. But they definitely are. If you could have put everything on a 2% cashback card, and you're putting everything on a 1 mile card, you are spending 2 cents for every single mile. And I think that for some people, that's it, right? Like you could put your spend on that. You can get a ticket or maybe 1.5 tickets a year covered by that, and you're fine. But if you're really going to look at traveling to specific destinations and specific times of the year, you want to put together something like a demand schedule where you get a real regular feel for who flies those routes and what the best way to do it is. I mean, there are these bright spots, Robert, let's say you want to fly to Salt Lake City from Southern California here, and you just have like a family member connection there and you're flying back and forth all the time. You definitely want Alaska miles for that, right? Or AA miles for that, or you want options, right? Definitely want options for that flight, because it is a Delta route, big time Delta route, LA to Salt Lake City. But it's also really competitive, and there's other airlines that fly it, and you could end up with a situation like an Alaska booking where it's 4,500 Alaska miles to go one way, and Delta might want, who knows, 20,000, right? So I think if you're into regular travel, it pays to differentiate and move into all these other programs. But if you're not, man, it's all noise. Robert, there are so many people listening probably have like bucket a program with Qantas and British Airways. They have 100,000 because they signed up for a credit card there, and they have like AA miles, and they don't even live in an AA city, and they have a Southwest Companion Pass, and they fly twice a year. That's all noise at that level of travel. And I think that that's really the important thing. What do you think, Robert?
I like that a lot, because I always give the example of buying a bicycle. That with the kids growing up, you need to get a bike and it's like $600, and like, I should have, scrutinized that purchase a little more. And I'm thinking, no, my total lifetime expenditure on bicycles over a decade is maybe $3,000, and if travel is that kind of thing for you, then don't sweat it. Don't sweat. Just get out the crowbar and pay with the cash that you earn at your W-2 job for the flights that you want to take when you want to take them. But I think there are people that do kind of have that pattern like you're talking about. They live in a certain market. They go visit their kids at this certain time. They go visit to this vacation destination a certain time. And it's regular enough and it's recurring enough that they would do well to get to know a couple of programs pretty well. And it feels good, right? I just signed up for this JetBlue credit card. It has 80,000 miles, and I use that to fly 6 times. That's great. That's totally good. You don't need to get to be a crazy credit card churner to, you can get a
get value
Sapphire card every 4 years. You can, Barclays cards, you can get them, every couple of years, something like that. Do that. Absolutely do that. I talk to people a lot of time about, you don't want to make this your life's ambition. Fine. Maybe between Christmas and New Year's, sit down and revisit your credit card portfolio once a year, just kind of like you do taxes. Sign up for 2 or 3 cards. Like we were
Close
talking
a
about.
Couple.
Yeah, once a year. Not every 3 months, not every month, not every week. Just once a year.
We don't need to optimize to the extreme every single thing we do, and if we're not traveling that much, take the wins. Just take the wins, really. But miles sitting unused are not a benefit to you. We talked on a paid show about deploying miles with airlines that have flexible cancellation policies to hold seats on flights where prices are going to go up, seats are going to disappear. I mean, we absolutely do not want to hoard miles. Again, reminding myself of a post here on the blog. But, signing up for a credit card because someone told you to sign up for a credit card is not valuable if they don't live where you live, travel where you travel, have the same number of seat requirements and kids or no kids. Just because they say you're going to get a certain amount of value out of it, you could get zero value out of it. And the last thing I want to mention is, if you really are adept at playing this game and you put your spend on a cashback card, you could probably buy miles for less than what you get on that cashback card, either on a sale or even on an everyday price. Like, you can't buy enough miles to fly around the world. You can't buy enough miles to fly 10 flights a year. But if you fly one flight a year, you could probably buy Alaska miles or AA miles at a level for a family of 4 even on a sale, and just put everything on a cashback card and do that.
Yeah.
So there's options that don't get any discussion, really.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to call them out.
Yeah, I was thinking of, if you work so hard to get status, that if you don't travel frequently enough, it doesn't make it worthwhile. We've talked about the Southwest Companion Pass. You mentioned that in passing.
That's a great example.
You have to fly a ton to make that make sense to you, and how many of the flights that you're going to take are going to be Southwest. How well is your airport served by Southwest? It's been a very effective promotion for them. And when I first got into the game, it seemed like everybody was talking about that. And they thought for sure that this loophole, so to speak, would end with it. And it's still here years later. And it's got to be a reason why it's here years later. And it's that it's a good promotion for them. It gets people flying on their planes, and people don't fly nearly as much as they thought they might. I think there's a lot of things you can do, like getting status, that you don't really use that frequently. And, just expanding it even bigger, like a vacation home. Right? How many times are you going to go to a vacation home? Rent that with Airbnb or Vacasa or some other technique. If you play golf 2 times a year, not a good idea to get a country club membership. That round of golf became the most expensive thing that you did that year. So travel can be that way for us. It can be that thing for us. We need to really make sure that we're right-sizing our money that we're plowing into the endeavor to be commensurate with the amount of travel that we're actually doing. And I think, like you say, demand schedule. Looking at that realistically, is it a 4-time-a-year thing? Is it a once-a-month thing? And really determining what you're going to do based on that. I have friends in real life who say to me, I would just like just a little bit of airline status. I was like, you guys fly like 2 or 3 times a year. Why do you want that? And I guess maybe airlines, my only guess would be, airlines make people feel really bad if they have no status. Wasn't there an AA status level or a credit card that gets you group 5 boarding? And it's like, group 5 boarding? What if I have no status? What am I, be group 25? Like this, you make people who come in with no advantage whatsoever feel like the most disadvantaged people in the world. It's like, hey, I paid for a ticket here too. Can I get on the plane?
Yeah, that's a great call out. Look, I love travel, right? And to your point, I think being rational about how much you're actually going to travel is important. I think people think they're going to do this more than they are going to do it. It's like joining a gym in January. I'm going to go all the time.
Or buying a timeshare.
And by March, or buying a timeshare. Great travel example. The timeshare pitch, it's just going to pay for itself. You're going to take more trips.
It'll force you to
all that
travel.
Stuff. It'll force you to travel. And it might for the first year or two, but then eventually it fades. And being honest with yourself about how much you're going to travel is really key. Yeah. Because there's always an extra option. I mean, let's call it out. You stayed at a timeshare this year that you didn't have any membership in, and you don't have any you didn't even take a tour or anything, right? There's always a way.
No, I appreciate that, right? And that if we take that same mindset and bring it to air travel or hotels or whatever it might be, just nibble at it, find the way to get the thing that you absolutely want. And so that's the point, right? That do fly first class if you want to. Do take the perfect flight time that you want. Don't take a connection if you don't want to. So I think maybe to round it out, everything that we talk on the Paid Show week after week is aimed at that and not falling for these traps that the airline and the loyalty programs have set up.
I mean, is anyone doing it better than Delta, in your opinion? We start the show talking about how high their first class cabin sale rate is. Is that a recommendation for them over any other airline in your opinion?
That's an interesting puzzle because, I don't honestly see that much differentiation in the price of first class domestically on AA or United or other airlines, right? In a lot of cases. So I don't think they're unique in just charging a little bit more for first class and trying to sell it out from beneath their elites. But I think on other airlines, I do see more of those seats going to complimentary upgrades. So there does seem to be a little bit of a difference there. And I think with those other airlines, there's more international upside. Delta, for example, I think has the weakest alliance of the bunch. SkyTeam, it's like, what are you going to really redeem that for? Yeah, right? Yeah, and so they think about AA in one world. That's a very, very big. And Star Alliance, I got a lot of respect for them, right? So there's this idea, I think, and maybe, it's like when Hyatt was small and they're trying to compete, they're program needed to be more ambitious, more rewarding to get your attention to stay at their hotels because their footprint wasn't as big.
Yeah.
With AA and United, you do have those international partners and there's all these aspirational things you can do. Delta, that's not the focus. So maybe that's a little bit of what we're seeing, international and domestic together. It's an interesting puzzle and mix, but I think they've done a good job designing their program to match what they actually are.
It also draws a line in the sand between these, I'm going to use air quotes, low-cost carriers and these established, really just Delta, United, and AA. They're playing in a completely different league. And I look to Southwest and feel for Southwest in this situation. They have one cabin in their plane. They really are they don't have the same booking channel. Their prices are now being compared to these mainline carriers. And I think the light is being shown on them and how they're not low cost. And their prices are normally higher, I think, than some of these other carriers where you get a better experience and the potential to step up with a little bit more cash. I mean, I would 100% of the time fly Delta first class over Southwest if it was the same price and the same type of flight. And that puts Southwest in a bad position. And then you're hearing about Spirit, the issues with Spirit right now, and JetBlue can't get a merger going. Nobody wants to dance with them, or they want everybody. They want to dance with everybody, but it seems like their father-in-law is pushing them away and saying no or something. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating.
The whole airline industry is fascinating.
Absolutely, and we love talking about it, although we're certainly not experts in the inside of it. But I just love observing it from a consumer's perspective on all these moves that they're making, and the options that we have are great. Like we always say, the flight has to exist in order to find an angle on how to get it for a cheap price. So I'm glad that we have a healthy airline industry. That there's all these great routes that we can take. I look my hometown airport of Boston,
so great.
Your hometown airport of LA, the places that we can get all over the world at reasonable prices. And I love then even bashing that price down even more to take the flights we want.
That kicks me off with one last thing to talk about, which is, we're really lucky. We live in major markets served by 4, 5, 6 airlines, really. If you're Delta captive, I think the whole calculus changes. If you're in a non-Delta market, I think most of what we just talked about is noise. And so it is very much dependent on you. And finding someone like a partner in this game. And I do love the network. We called it the network because it was like a podcast network. But the network is really all the people that have this same mindset that we have, approaching travel rationally and really doing some analytical thought about what we're doing and how we're doing it. The network is all the people that are in our Patreon Slack and that are sharing, really localized information. Like, I don't know anything about Little Rock, Arkansas and what works there and what doesn't, Robert, but there's probably half a dozen people that do. And I think that finding someone in your area, it's so weird because it's like you find someone that is in this game that's in your area and you're like, oh my God, there's more than one of me. It's amazing. And that's one of the really powerful things I think of the internet is you can have this very small, specific interest and find someone that also has that same interest. And I think that's something to call out here because it's helpful.
Absolutely. My favorite social network, bar none.
That's true, Robert. It is. Great social network. So, and with that, I think we should close the show out. What do you think?
Let's do it. Thanks for joining us this week. For a more in-depth discussion about points and miles, visit us at patreon.com/Milenomics. There you'll get a special link to listen to additional content right in your mobile podcast app or on your computer where we speak more freely about topics like these.
As always, you can reach us on social media. I'm at Milenomics and Robert's at Robert Dwyer. Till then, we'll see you on the site.